Hey, welcome to the Empowered and Free podcast. My name is Erin Kimbrell, and I'm a counselor, certified life coach, breathwork coach, and small town mom of two. I know firsthand what it feels like to live with high functioning anxiety. For most of my life, I had so much mental mess, anxiety, people pleasing, perfectionism, overthinking, constant worrying, and never feeling good enough. On my decade-long journey to feeling better, I've learned how to take back my life from high-functioning anxiety and helped others to do the same through my coaching and breathwork programs. Now I want to share everything I know with you. This podcast will help you feel empowered over your high-functioning anxiety and free to finally live the life of your dreams. Now, grab a cup of coffee, get comfy, and dive into the episode. I'm Erin Kimbrell, and this is the Empowered and Free podcast. Hey, today we are spilling the tea on surprising ways that high-functioning anxiety affects all areas of your life. So we're talking work, home, motherhood, relationships, and more. All right. I want to first start by saying that not all of the things that I'm going to share today are bad things. All right. You're not an awful person. You're not terrible for doing these things. What I want you to notice is it's all about the intention behind the action. What's the deeper reason that you're doing the behavior? It's all about that energy. And what I mean by that is, how do you feel when you're doing each of these things we're going to talk about? Do you feel calm, relaxed, excited? Or do you feel panicked, frenzied, rushed, or forced to do a thing? And so the intention, the difference here is that maybe if you're feeling good about it, you might be thinking, this is perfect for me. This is everything I want to be doing. Versus if it's not, you might be thinking, I need to do this thing in order to feel good enough, in order to feel worthy, in order to feel safe, whatever that is for you. All right. So we're going to break it down again. You're not awful if you do these things. I can relate to so many of these and many more, but let's break down these sneaking, surprising ways that high functioning anxiety shows up in all different areas of your life. Let's first start with work. And this is for good reason, because work is where I struggled the most with my high functioning anxiety. This started when I was a kid in school. I wanted to always do my best, right? Like perfect. And now as an adult, I still struggle with this, but it's in my work. So let's run through some ways that we know that we are struggling with high functioning anxiety and how it shows up at work. Number one, you're really good at what you do. I know you are. And because of that, a lot of people probably come to you for advice or they come to you for help. Sound familiar, right? As a result, a lot of us get more loaded onto our plate because we are really good at what we do, and we take on more and more and more, and then we're left feeling overwhelmed and just like it's too much. All right. Another way it shows up is that you don't miss deadlines. You will do everything in your power to make something happen by the time it's supposed to happen, because in your mind, missing a deadline would be a failure, and failure is not an option for you. Now, here's kind of the flip side of that. Because we don't want to miss deadlines, but a lot of times our anxiety causes us to procrastinate because we don't have time to do it perfect, or it's too much. We end up doing things at the last minute so that we don't miss that deadline, which puts a lot of pressure on ourselves to finish something, right? I get it. I'm a procrastinator. I understand, but missing deadlines is not an option for somebody with high functioning anxiety. You can't just go and say, hey, I actually can't do this. It's not feasible. I'm not going to be able to make the deadline. You wouldn't even dare. All right. Next, if you struggle at work with high functioning anxiety, you want to achieve, you have the need to achieve. So you're always looking for an award, right? A promotion, or you just want to be recognized. Again, not saying these things are bad, right? It's great to receive this type of affirmation that you're doing a good job, but we have this drive in us that forces us to always be going for that need to achieve. And because of that too, we have perfectionism that kicks into overdrive. You're always planning. You're always overthinking, considering all the possible options, looking for the exact right answer. You're super organized and you're type A. Again, I feel you. I understand. People at work used to make comments like, oh my gosh, you're so organized, or you planned that perfectly, or you thought of everything. And it's because I did. right? And so that kind of fueled the fire, like, oh, yes, this is working for me. But the flip side is it was awful. It took me a long time to finish things, right? A lot of stress that I put on myself because my expectations were so high for everything to be perfect. You probably look pretty nice on the outside, right? You're dressed well. I loved making sure that my clothes looked nice at work. My hair and makeup was done. And maybe for you, this cannot relate to this last one, but maybe for you, even show up early to work. Not to me. I'm like the one on two wheels pulling in right on time, for sure. When you are someone who does things well at work, you get the extra duties added to your plate. And maybe you're a yes person. You agree to take them on. Somebody says, hey, your boss says, hey, can you take this project on? You're my go-to. You're really good at this, and you say, sure, of course, I'll do that. No problem. Maybe you even volunteer to help. You know that somebody's struggling and you say, oh, I'll help you. But what happens is we take on so much that overachiever feels satisfied and accomplished, but you eventually find yourself overwhelmed, overloaded, and overworked. All the overs. That's how it feels. When we're doing these kind of things, we're also people pleasing at work. You're trying to make sure everybody likes you, even if that means you're taking on way too much, even if that means you're agreeing to things that you shouldn't, things that are outside of your wheelhouse, things that other people are perfectly capable of doing, but you say, sure, I'll do it, because we have that people-pleasing tendency. Another way high-functioning anxiety shows up at work is having feelings of resentment and anger, frustration towards yourself because you agreed to take on those things that are outside of your scope, or having frustration, anger, resentment towards your boss, towards your coworkers, towards people that push your boundaries, people that say, hey, can you take that shift for me? Or could you take on this project? Or could you stay a little bit late today? We've really got this big thing. They drop it in your lap at the last minute. We've really got this and I need you to finish. Maybe they say, hey, can you check my email on a day that you're off or on your vacation week? Right? All of these things, people pushing your boundaries and or a lack of boundaries can cause a lot of feelings of resentment and anger. You probably also have trouble delegating and micromanaging. And what do I mean by this? We have, my friends, a need for control. You're going to hear this theme of control and a need for control coming up in all areas of your life and different ways that it can look. But when we're talking about at work, you probably want to micromanage everything, right? We want to make sure that everything is perfect, everything is right. And so we have our hands in all the pots and all the things, watching over everybody's shoulder, making sure they're doing it right. Hear me when I say this, it's not your job. Your job is to take care of your duties and your tasks. And maybe you are a manager. Maybe you do have people to check over, but their results aren't your expectation, right? That's not your responsibility on your plate. That's on theirs. When we struggle with high functioning anxiety, I mentioned we have trouble delegating. It's hard for you to give other people things to do because you want it done well. And usually done well means done your way because you're going to make sure it's done perfectly. But the truth is we don't have time to do all the things. We can't run these full organizations by ourselves. We need help. And so that's one thing I really worked on was learning how to delegate, learning how to ask for help, and kind of releasing some of the control, backing off. I know control freaks. Again, I get it. It's me. And I understand that that's really hard. At the root here, what drives you to do really well at work is a fear of failure. You're worried about messing up. Okay. You're worried about disappointing other people or letting them realize that potentially you're not perfect. And because of that, it leaves you with this constant nervous energy at work. You probably feel like you're running a million miles a minute, like you can't rest, you can't take a lunch, you have so much to do. And quickly, that leads to burnout over time. That is not a fun place to be in. So even though you may desperately need that time off work to get better, get your life together, you're too scared to call out. So you kind of force and push your way through. All of these things I just talked about were a lot of sneaky ways that high functioning anxiety shows up at work. Now let's talk about at home. At home, we also have a need for control. This is our space. This is like my home is my safe space. It's my haven. It is where I want to be. And I felt a need for control in my home. And the reality is, there are several other people living here in my house. There's my husband and my 2 kids, and I can't control what they do to a certain point. When we have such a need for control in our houses, in our homes, when we feel like it has to be perfectly cleaned, perfectly organized, chores done exactly as they should be, and you can't function any other way. And so what I mean by that is, if the living room's a little bit of a mess, if the dishes aren't stacked perfectly in the dishwasher, are you pretty stressed about it? Does it feel like your home has to be perfect, or it's a stress-filled environment? Going back to what I talked about earlier, what's your intention? What's your feeling behind the action? What's your reason that you're doing the thing? I love a clean home, an organized home as much as anybody. It does help my mind feel clear. I do feel better. Okay. But can I work if there's Legos in the living room floor? I absolutely can. I absolutely can. And I have. And I've done it. Do I make my bed on a daily basis? No. Can I be okay with that? Sure. Was there a point in time when I couldn't, when that stuff would stress me out to no end? Yes. And that's how we know this high functioning anxiety is really just a need for control showing out in our homes. Maybe you have such a perfectionist way about how your house looks. You only want your house to look the best. You really want your house to look like no one actually lives there, which is funny, right? Have you ever been to a house where somebody says, "Oh, excuse the mess," and you walk in and it literally looks like it came out of a magazine? And you're like, "What mess?" Okay. If that's you, I'm sorry. I don't want to call you out, but that's a sign that high functioning anxiety is showing up in our houses. The truth is, we live there. It is our home. It is not meant to be perfect. It is meant to be lived in. Okay. But when we have this perfectionist idea of how our house should look, or when we're such high achievers that we want to maybe make it look like we're living outside of our means, right? We're buying all this nice fancy stuff for our house when it's not really something that's in our budget. It doesn't need to look like the picture of a magazine to be a house that has love and caring and support, right? So just check yourself there if you find that that's how yours shows up. Maybe your high functioning anxiety in your house shows up because you get really overwhelmed with all the things to do and you want them to be done perfectly well. And what I mean here is, we're not sharing the load. We're not asking for people to take on tasks. We're not asking for help. So let's talk about like chores in our house, just normal responsibilities, things that need to be done. Are you the one who's doing all the things, or the majority of the things? Might be stepping on some toes here, because I know a lot of people in my real life, people that are my friends, that do take on most of the responsibility. Okay. And I'm not even going to get into the whole stay-at-home moms thing versus work-at-home moms. I still always think there should be some shared responsibility of the load. Okay. If you struggle with asking for help in other ways, let's talk about dinner, right? How many of us struggle to get dinner on the table, but we refuse to get takeout, to order a meal delivery service, right? To ask someone else in our house to cook dinner? What about a clean house? How many of us have been dying to have a house cleaner and still haven't hired one? Because for some reason we think, what is that going to mean about me that I can't keep my house clean? Or maybe you're the person who cleans before the house cleaner comes over. I'm laughing because I just had this conversation with a friend. Love you so much. I'm not going to call you out, but you know who you are. Okay. And maybe it's something as simple as carpool. You feel like you have to be the mom who's in the line, ready to pick up your kid, ready to drop off your kid every day, when the reality is there's people that can help you with that. In fact, share the load. It'd probably help them out a lot too. If you struggle with feeling like you have to do it all, that's a sign that high functioning anxiety is showing up in your life. Okay. And then lastly, the last thing I'll talk about in your home is looking like you have it all together. And lastly, the last thing I'll talk about here, as far as high functioning anxiety and how it shows up in your home, feeling like you have to look like you have it all together. And so here's my little story. When we used to have parties at my house, this was before I got into like minimalism and decluttering and all that kind of stuff. We just had a bunch of crap laying all over the place, to be real honest, I feel like. And way too much stuff. Our bedroom was like the catch-all, the messy place, whatever. So I would always be in like this panicked rush before the party started. And so I would take all of the things that weren't where they were supposed to go, and I would just shove them into our stairwell, because our stairwell led up into our upstairs. Nobody went up there. It was an unfinished space. I would shove them into the stairwell, and it was like a leaning tower of junk when I got done. And it's because I didn't want people to think that, oh, my house is perfectly clean and organized and we don't have any extra mess. It was all on the stairs. And then it would take me months to get through the mess on the stairs, putting it where it needed to go. But I wanted to look like I had it all together. I would not let people over when my house was dirty, when there was stuff somewhere that maybe it shouldn't be. Okay. So again, you hear me saying, like, I get it, I understand. I'm just trying to help you understand these little ways that it can show up. So let's now shift into our motherhood. For those of us that are moms, man, the level of anxiety you have when all of a sudden these people that you love and care about so much are outside of your body and outside of your control, it brings about a lot of panic, right? A lot of kind of nervous freak out energy. And so we want control over our kids. Let's first even start with like their safety, which is important. I get this. My friend, her husband used to call me the safety queen, because when my kids were little, my kids are older now, but when my kids were little, I was on them right there behind them. They weren't going to be near the water. They weren't going to go down the slide. They weren't going to do anything without me being right behind them. And so he jokingly nicknamed me Safety Queen, but he really wasn't kidding. I was helicopter parent like extraordinaire. We have to protect our kids, right? That's the reality. But when we feel like we have to protect them from anything and everything, and they can't have any type of discomfort or pain, we're kind of doing them a disservice. Outsiders might be looking at you being like, whoa, she needs to chill. She's a little bit overboard. Another way I see this helicopter parenting show up is being extremely careful about who they spend their time with and what they're doing with their time. Again, I'm the person that my kid goes to like a handful of houses. So I am protective to an extent, for sure. Very careful about like sleepovers and all that. We won't get into all that. But when it's so extreme, like I've worked with kids and talked to kids who they can't go anywhere. They can't go outside in the yard. They can't go anywhere for a sleepover. This is a personal choice, but I just want, again, can we assess the intentions behind why we're doing the thing? Being extremely restrictive isn't necessarily helping our kids, and it might be that control piece showing up. Also, high functioning anxiety in our motherhood shows when we have excessive worry about what could happen to them. So when that worst case scenario is kicked up, we feel like everything bad and awful and scary is going to happen. So it causes us to avoid, because that's what anxiety causes us to do. We don't go out in public. We don't take our kids anywhere, right? Excessive is what I want you to hear here. I personally, as safety queen, helicopter parent, think that we should obviously be concerned about our kids, and we should, could worry to some extent about our kids. But when it becomes excessive so that it's deeply affecting our life and their life, you might want to check what's going on here. Okay. Last thing I'll say about control over your kids is that, and let me just pause and say, some of my mom friends are going to feel called out, but I love you. I love you. When we are over checking our kids' assignments, when we're over checking their Google Classroom, jumping on their case when they haven't finished something that was due, in 2 days, and we're like, why haven't you finished that yet? Or when they maybe don't make perfect straight A's, and we just push and challenge instead of just encouraging them to strive for their personal best. I personally don't have a grade requirement for my kids, but guess what? They pull pretty much straight A's most of the time. We have a B here and there, and the world continues on. Okay. We just want to make sure that we're encouraging our kids to strive for their personal best instead of being the one that feels like they have to encourage their child to be perfect. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about mom guilt. When we have high functioning anxiety in our motherhood, it can make us feel very guilty. We can think all the time, what am I doing that's messing my kids up? How am I screwing them up? What am I doing wrong? What kind of problem have I caused them? What are they going to be talking about in therapy in 20 years? All right. We got to let the mom guilt go. We are not perfect. We are human. Just like our kids are human, they're going to mess up and we're going to mess up. But when we sit there and just focus on everything we're doing wrong instead of everything we're doing right, that's a big sign that high functioning anxiety is kicked up. We can be super self-critical. Mom culture is probably like one of the worst environments to be in because it makes us doubt every single decision we make. You cannot feel like you're making the right choice when you're a mom. Breastfeed or bottle feed, they're both wrong if you ask different people, right? Sleep training or letting them sleep with you in your bed. I mean, that starts from birth, from a newborn stage. And that continues. So I don't want you to feel that from me today. I'm not criticizing any of these choices. Again, we all get to make our own choices about how we parent. But just notice when that self-critical piece is kicked up and sit with what feels right for you. Don't just follow it because I said so. I'm not the know-all be-all. You're the one who knows what's right for you. Okay. Just showing you some signs and symptoms of high functioning anxiety in your motherhood. The last one I'll talk about motherhood is feeling exhausted and overextended. Okay. Because you feel stressed and spread too thin, you can't show up as the mom that you want to be. So for me, this was my motivation. This is kind of one of the reasons I started this journey. I felt more motivated to work on myself so that I could be the mom I wanted my kids to be. I wasn't my main motivation at first. They were. Maybe that's what can be the thing that kind of lights the fire in you today. So that's a lot about high functioning anxiety and motherhood. Let's shift over to our other relationships. Okay. I'm going to speak in generalities, but any relationship you have, whether it's a romantic relationship with a partner, maybe it's a relationship with your family members or even your friends. What we see here in relationships is overgiving and helping too much, especially when it isn't given back in return. So when you give and give and give and give, and then you feel like nobody's giving that back to you, that might be a sign that there's some high functioning anxiety going on in your relationships. If you're always willing to help other people, always not considering yourself, not looking at maybe what you need, but you're always willing to just drop it all and go help someone else, that might be another sign. Okay. I'll do separate episodes on this, but the root of this could be that you don't want to let other people down. You're worried about being a bad friend, a bad partner, a bad daughter, or you're worried to lose them. And so you do anything and everything to keep that relationship. Another way we see high functioning anxiety in our relationships is a super full, busy schedule. There's not a lot of white space, not a lot of free time. Fitting in time with your friends months in advance might be a sign here. I kind of laugh because this happens. Me and my close friends will be like, okay, when do you guys want to get together? We'd love to hang out. And then we're like, what about in 4 months? Because none of us have free time. Okay. When that is happening, that might be a sign you want to check. Oh, what am I doing here? Why do I have so many things on this calendar? And lastly, we'll talk about self-doubt and worry in your relationships. So if you're constantly questioning your choices, whether it's your choice about who to be around, whether it's your choice about your actions, all of these things, constantly doubting yourself is definitely a sign that you're struggling with high functioning anxiety. And then lastly, we're just going to generalize life in general, how you know if you're struggling with high functioning anxiety in your different areas of your life. These are sneaky ways they show up. And a big one here is a lack of boundaries. So this really can apply to all of the areas we just talked about. Lack of boundaries, not knowing when is your personal time, what your personal rules are for how you spend your time and what you choose to do and what's important to you and how you take care of yourself, right? Lacking boundaries, not having those is a sign that high functioning anxiety is at play. Okay. All right. I know this is a lot. If you can relate to any of the things I said, again, this is not guilt or shame or any of that. It's the feeling that I get it. I've been there. I know that high functioning anxiety can show up in sneaky and surprising ways, but it also does not have to continue to be this way, right? So many of the things that I mentioned here that I've struggled with, I've also healed. I'm no longer doing those things. My clients share their stories with me all the time about how they've done the same. Maybe they've stopped over giving in relationships. Maybe they started kind of putting themselves first and their needs. And they tell me about the ways, the ripple effects that it has on their life. They tell me that they lean on their tools often and how their lives are forever changed. This is not me tooting my own horn. This is me trying to let you know that this work works. Okay. The whole point of me speaking here on this podcast is helping you feel heard, seen, empowered, and encouraged. So what I want you to hear after all of that is that you don't have to live this way forever. You don't have to have these constant feelings of anxiety. Okay. There can be a different way for you. If you're struggling with high functioning anxiety, please reach out. All right. I can help you find that next right step for you, helping you figure out what the path is. Maybe it's breath work. Maybe that's where you want to start. That's where some of my clients started. I have a breathwork membership. I have one-to-one breathwork sessions that are customized just to you. Maybe you're ready to dive into some coaching. You're ready to get into the nitty-gritty, the deep stuff. And maybe you want to be supported with others through my group coaching program, or maybe one-to-one feels like it for you, so that it's just you and I working together through everything that's coming up for you. Whatever it is, know that I'm here for you. I truly, truly want to help you because I want you to feel differently than you feel now. All right, my friend, thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time. Hey, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. You don't know how much it means to me. If you'd like more behind the scenes content, inspiration, and daily reminders that encourage and uplift you, follow me on Instagram at heyerinkimbrell and send me a DM to say hey. If any of the episodes have been super helpful for you, please consider leaving me a review on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you like to listen. It helps me so incredibly much, and it allows the podcast to be seen by other people who need it. If you want to learn more from me, head to heyerinkimbrell.com. That's where you'll find all my free resources, read the podcast show notes, and learn more information about my online coaching and breathwork programs that help you create the life you want. If you want to keep the conversation going from today's episode, join us in our exclusive podcast Facebook community, Empowered and Free Help for High Functioning Anxiety. I'm here for you, and I'm always cheering you on. I'll see you next time. I'm Erin Kimbrell, and this is the Empowered and Free podcast.